Hello.
Can you talk a little bit about the team dynamic with Barry and his new friends and how they'll be interacting?
Yeah, I mean, one thing we were able to do on this show that we weren't on Arrow, because so much of it was keeping his secret, was really give him a group at the outset. The original design for the Star Labs gang was, if we're going to be really dealing with sci-fi elements on the show, having a group of characters that make that fun to discuss and have conversations about for the audience. And that was sort of, I think, in the sort of construct of it. And then you also knew that, for me, part of the fun of the character was we talked a lot about the right stuff, and that film, and sort of as they were learning the power of these rockets and trying to send a man into space. Here we have a guy who can break the sound barrier when he runs, and he's this jet, he's sort of this human jet. So all of the science of him, or like you think about Apollo 13 or something, like those kind of movies where it's like putting that kind of stuff together. That's kind of the fun stuff, I think, for the team. And then there's the emotional half of it of, none of them necessarily signed up for this, and yet here they are, and they went from being sort of like working at a mixture of Steve Jobs and Elon Musk, and now they're kind of they're all persona non grata, working at a place that's kind of defunct, helping out a guy who wants to be a superhero, so there's that kind of element. And then there's the crime element, which Joe brings in, and they're dealing with real criminals, and so there's all sorts of fun, I think, to be had and all that.
Can you talk about Barry and his dad? I mean, that was one of their scenes in the pilot. It was one of the best, my favorite moments. Can you talk about how that thread will continue throughout the season?
Yeah, I mean, his father's innocence, and now Joe, it's not just Barry who knows that his dad's innocent, it's now Joe, who's never thought of it that way before. And here he's a guy who's sort of really, when he sets his mind to crack a case, he's going to crack the case. So him and Barry working on it together, and it's sort of interesting because it's kind of his surrogate dad is helping him free his biological dad, and then we have the sort of maybe nefarious dad, who he's also working with. We always think it's sort of we talk a lot about how Barry kind of has many fathers, like a real athlete or something, would have different coaches, the pursuit of what really happened that night. And I don't think Barry could ever experience a more joyful moment than his father walking out of that cell. And we hope even in the outset, some really interesting ways to keep that story going and to keep, what's it like when does his dad, his real dad, his biological dad, see the Flash for the first time? What's that like? So there's all sorts of, I think, fun elements.
Do you have any plans to bring in any other actors from the original Flash TV series?
We certainly have the hope to. I think that would be cool. Just because for us, and again, so much of when we go to work every day, we're like, all right, we have this many horrible, challenging things to deal with, and what would be fun, And that's on our list of what would be fun, I think. But we haven't settled on who that would be.
You guys have time for one more question.
One thing that I always hear when people keep coming back to about the show is how it seems more bright and optimistic compared to a lot of recent superhero depictions. How much of that was just sort of how the show developed organically, or how much of that was sort of something you deliberately wanted to do from the outside?
It was definitely very deliberate. You never know how well you're going to pull it off,
sure.
But it was definitely, the intent was deliberate, in large part, I think, because it reflected who Barry's character was. And in the comic book, here was a guy who was, he could run really fast, and so it wasn't and he was dealing in the sci-fi world, and it was, and he had a sense of humor, and he had a sense of awe of the things that were happening to him and around him, and so that was all. You put that kind of all together, and you just get a brighter show. And we wanted to contrast it from Arrow, and we were all big Donner Superman fans, and so I thought that was I've always sort of felt like that was sort of the most iconic version of the bright superhero world.
Can you talk about what the public's reaction to the Red Streak is going to be? Is it going to be like Oliver Queen or as Arrow was, or is it going to be different?
It's going to be different. And it's also because he's not necessarily a vigilante out putting arrows at people.
Right.
And there's also other weird shit happening in this town. And I would say people like Iris have a keen interest in this because they know that that Barry's been saying for years weird stuff. happened the night his mom died, and she cares about him, and she cares about solving that mystery too. So that's probably what I have to say.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Greg.